A 16-year-old girl is just trying to get through her week, dealing with the everyday things a high school athlete worries about: track meets, youth group, and hanging out with friends. Then, her car breaks down. But I need you to hear me on this. This wasn't bad luck or an old engine finally giving out. Someone intentionally sabotaged her vehicle with motor oil, setting a deliberate, cold-blooded trap to strand her on the road. Before the night was over, Kayla Huff was kidnapped, shoved into the trunk of a car, brutally beaten with a baton, and shot dead in a local conservation area. Now, a grieving community is looking at 6 of its own, 5 adults and a juvenile, and wondering how a massive coordinated conspiracy to murder a kid could happen right in their own backyard. This isn't just about figuring out who pulled the trigger. It's about untangling a deeply disturbing web of stolen police cars, escaped suspects, and the terrifying reality that the people who plotted to kill the girl everyone called Kayla Bug lived right down the street. If you want to help us shed light on these tragic stories, subscribe to U.S. Crime Cases. Your support helps us seek true justice together. Right, so let's really sit down and talk about what happened on May 6, 2026, because it is one of the most unsettling things you can ever hear about. We all know that sudden, sinking feeling of panic when your car starts sputtering on a quiet road. You pull over, you grab your phone, and you instantly feel vulnerable. You just want to get home safely. But for Kayla, that vulnerability was entirely manufactured. The people who did this knew exactly what they were doing. They tampered with her car. They specifically messed with the motor oil, knowing for an absolute fact that it would force her engine to fail and make her pull over. That detail alone is what changes this from a tragic crime to something purely evil. That means this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment mistake. It wasn't an argument that got out of hand at a high school party. It was a literal ambush. They planned it. They waited for it to work. They probably watched her drive away, just waiting for the car to inevitably break down, and they swooped in when she was completely helpless on the side of the road. When you actually take a step back and analyze the psychology of a crime like this, the level of premeditation is what really chills you to the bone. Think about it for a second. To sabotage a car means you have time to think about what you are doing. You have hours to walk away. You have time to back out, go home, and sleep it off. You have time to realize you are about to destroy an entire family. But they didn't stop. They kept going with the plan. They grabbed a 16-year-old girl, forced her into the dark, cramped trunk of a car, and drove her away. Wow. Just pause and think about the sheer terror she must have felt in that trunk. It's pitch black. You can hear the hum of the tires on the asphalt, feeling every bump and turn, having absolutely no idea where you are being taken or why the people outside are doing this to you. And she was driven out to the Rudolf Bennitt Conservation Area. It's a secluded spot. It's the kind of place you take someone when you know you don't want anyone to hear what's about to happen. Then they pulled her out of that trunk and they beat her with a baton. It is a level of personal, hands-on violence that is incredibly hard to wrap your head around, especially when you realize who the victim was. Beating a teenager with a baton takes a deeply personal kind of rage. It's exhausting, it's cruel, and it's intimate in the worst possible way. After the beating, they shot her. They ended her life right there in the woods and just left her. You really have to ask yourself, how does a kid become the target of something so coordinated and brutal? Because Kayla wasn't just a name on a news report or a face on a missing poster. Around Moberly, Missouri, she was known affectionately as Kayla Bug. That nickname alone tells you so much about her spirit. She was a sophomore at Moberly High School. She was vibrant. She ran track. She played basketball. She was the kind of kid who was always moving, always doing something positive. She spent a massive chunk of her free time deeply involved in the youth group at Emmanuel Baptist Church. People who actually knew her, her classmates, her teammates, her teachers, talk about her radiant smile. They talk about how much she loved animals and how she was always the very first person to give a comforting hug to someone who looked like they were having a bad day. She was a nurturer. I see cases all the time where the victim was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it hits so much harder when you realize they took someone who spent her young life trying to care for other people. When she first disappeared, the town didn't just sit around. Moberly is a tight-knit community. They panicked. For days, Moberly residents and law enforcement searched tirelessly for her. You can picture the scene. Parents looking at their own kids, hugging them a little tighter before school, people sharing her picture on social media, taping flyers to gas station windows. They were out in the woods, walking in lines, calling out her name. You always want to believe in the best-case scenario. You hope maybe she just got lost, or her phone died and she's waiting for a tow truck somewhere off the grid. But as the days ticked by, that hope started to turn into a heavy, suffocating dread. I see it happen so often in these stories. The shift from "we will find her" to "we need to figure out what happened to her." And then the search reached its tragic conclusion. Randolph County Sheriff Andy Boggs had to stand up and confirm that they had found her remains. Wow. It's hard to even describe what a moment like that does to a town. It physically breaks people. But then the unsealed court documents came out, and the grief turned into absolute shock and anger. Because the police didn't start looking for a random drifter passing through town. They started arresting locals. They started arresting people who lived right there in the community. As of right now, 6 people have been detained. 5 adults and 1 juvenile. Let that really sink in for a second. 6 people. You have to wonder what kind of dark, twisted conversations were happening in the days leading up to May 6. How do 6 people sit around in a room or in a group chat and agree that a 16-year-old girl needs to die? And not a single one of them picks up a phone to call the cops anonymously? Not one of them has a crisis of conscience and says, "Hey, we can't do this." Instead, they work together. It's one thing to warn your kids about stranger danger. We all do that. But it's completely different when the monsters are people from your own town. The betrayal is just astronomical. Think about her parents, Michael and Renee, and her siblings, Christina and Joseph. They were her foundation. They loved her unconditionally. They sent their girl out into the world thinking she was safe in the town they called home. They probably gave her the exact same advice we all give our kids. If your car breaks down, lock the doors and call me. But what do you do when the threat isn't a random broken engine? What do you do when a group of people deliberately break your car so you're forced to stop on the side of the road? There is absolutely no parental advice in the world that can protect a kid from a 6-person premeditated ambush. It's just completely unfair. And maybe the most heartbreaking part to think about is her trusting nature, because she was a nurturer, because she was Kayla Bug. If someone pulled over behind her broken down car, maybe she thought they were there to help. Maybe she recognized one of them. Imagine the sheer devastation and confusion in those first few seconds when she realized they weren't stepping out of their car to help her with her engine. They were stepping out to take her away. Right? It is a heavy, dark thing to sit with, but we have to talk about it. We have to look at the reality of what happened to her, because she deserves to have the full truth of her story told. She didn't deserve any of this. She deserved to graduate high school. She deserved to go to her track meets, to hang out at youth group, to keep making her friends smile. Let's talk about the ripple effect, because a crime like this doesn't just stop with the victim. It shatters the entire sense of security for everyone who lives there. Moberly is the kind of place where people usually leave their front doors unlocked. It's the kind of town where kids ride their bikes until the streetlights come on and parents don't give it a second thought. But after May 6, all of that changed overnight. You can almost feel the paranoia settling over the streets. If a group of locals can plot something this intricate and this brutal against a sweet, church-going teenager, then who is actually safe? I see families in these situations, and the trauma they carry is something they will never, ever put down. Every time Michael and Renee look at a basketball or see a track field or walk past the youth group room at Emmanuel Baptist Church, they are going to be hit with a wave of grief that most of us cannot even fathom. They aren't just mourning the loss of their daughter, they are mourning the future she was violently robbed of. All those milestones, prom, graduation, a first real job, maybe a family of her own one day, were stolen from them by people who decided their dark impulses were more important than a human life. And then there are her friends, Think about the kids at Moberly High School. Being a teenager is hard enough on its own. You're just trying to figure out who you are. But now, these kids are having to process the fact that one of their brightest peers was murdered. They have to walk down the same hallways knowing she won't be at her locker. They have to run on the same track knowing she won't be cheering them on at the finish line. That kind of psychological weight on a high school community is devastating. It forces kids to grow up and face the ugliest parts of the real world way before they should ever have to. We have to keep centering Kayla in all of this. It's so easy to get caught up in the madness of the suspects, the stolen police cars, and the chaotic court documents that will inevitably follow. But at the core of all this noise is a 16-year-old girl who just wanted to go about her week. She was the victim of a manufactured nightmare. And as we continue to watch this case unfold, we owe it to her memory to never forget the bright, nurturing light she brought to her community before it was so viciously put out, right? And keeping that beautiful, nurturing light of hers in mind is so incredibly important when we transition into talking about the people who actually did this to her. Because when you start looking at the people arrested for this, the case shifts. It goes from a heartbreaking tragedy to absolute, unbelievable chaos. Right now, the investigation is still highly active, and law enforcement has detained 6 people. I really need you to let that sink in for a second. 6 people, 5 adults and 1 juvenile. We aren't talking about a lone wolf who snapped. We aren't talking about a random one-on-one encounter on a dark road. This was a crowd. This was a group effort to end a life. The 2 primary suspects facing the heaviest charges right now are 20-year-old Alayna Mason and Hunter Ames. They are the ones looking at first-degree murder and kidnapping charges, just 20 years old. They are barely out of high school themselves, probably walking the same streets and going to the same local spots as Kayla. You have to wonder how 2 people so young get to a point where they are capable of plotting something so intensely sinister. First-degree murder means it was premeditated. It means they thought about it, they planned it, and they executed it. To have that kind of darkness in you at 20 years old is something that is truly hard for me to wrap my head around. But the madness doesn't stop with just those 2. You also have 26-year-old Julian Mason, who has been formally charged with tampering with physical evidence in a felony prosecution. I see charges like this a lot, and we tend to gloss over them because they aren't the actual murder charge. But think about what tampering with evidence actually means in real life. It means someone was scrubbing away blood. It means someone was hiding a baton, burning clothes, or destroying cell phones. It is a completely cold, calculated act. While a family is out searching the woods for their missing daughter, Julian Mason is allegedly taking steps to make sure they never find her, just to protect his circle. And then you have 24-year-old Skylar Powell, who is charged with hindering the prosecution of a felony. Honestly, the details of what Powell allegedly did sound like something out of a bad action movie, not a real-life murder investigation in a small Missouri town. According to the probable cause statements, Alayna Mason was actually arrested at one point. The police had her in custody, but somehow, in a moment of pure chaos, she managed to steal a police patrol vehicle. Let's just pause and debate how insane that is. Wow. You are brought in for a murder investigation, literally the most serious crime a human being can commit, and your immediate move is to steal a cop car? The sheer arrogance and lawlessness of that action are staggering. It shows a complete disregard, not just for human life, but for the entire justice system. She didn't care. If you haven't subscribed to U.S. crime cases yet, please hit that button right now to help us seek justice together and support these stories. But the situation with the stolen cop car gets even worse. After Alayna took that vehicle and made a run for it, Skylar Powell didn't just watch it happen. According to the documents, Powell actively stepped in to help her. Powell allegedly helped Alayna get out of the police handcuffs and helped her hide from the authorities. Think about the conscious choices being made in that moment. You see someone on the run in a stolen police cruiser, wearing police-issued handcuffs, being hunted for the brutal murder of a local teenager, and your reaction is, yeah, I'm going to help you get away. It's completely baffling. They didn't just commit a horrible crime, They treated the aftermath like a massive game of catch me if you can. They treated the entire town, the police force, and the victim's family with absolute contempt. It makes you realize that these aren't just people who made a single bad choice. These are people who live completely outside the bounds of normal human empathy and societal rules. We really need to analyze the group dynamic here, because this is where the case gets exceptionally dark. Usually if someone comes up with a deranged plan to hurt or kill a teenager, they might tell one friend, and usually that friend freaks out. They say no, they walk away, or they anonymously call the police. Human conscience usually kicks in somewhere along the line, even in people who run in rough crowds. But here, you have an entire group of people who either actively participated in the killing, helped cover up the bloody evidence, or helped the main suspects run from the cops. How do 6 different people all agree that ending a 16-year-old girl's life or covering it up is the right move? I see this question pop up in group crimes all the time, and it never stops being disturbing. Was it fear? Were some of them just terrified of Alayna and Hunter, so they just went along with it? Or was it some twisted, toxic sense of loyalty? It is terrifying to think that a group of people can feed off each other's worst impulses to the point where they completely lose their humanity. Psychologists call it diffusion of responsibility. When you are in a pack, you start to feel like the blame is spread out. You think, well, I didn't strike the fatal blow, I just helped hide the car. Or, I just took off the handcuffs, I wasn't in the woods. They hype each other up, they validate each other's crazy ideas, and before you know it, they are driving a kidnapped girl out to a conservation area. They turned into a pack, and Kayla was their target. And we can't forget there is a juvenile involved in this group. Law enforcement detained a minor. Think about the adults in this situation dragging a kid into a murder conspiracy. Instead of protecting a younger person, they pulled them into a nightmare that is going to end with ruined lives and prison sentences. The level of manipulation required to get a juvenile to participate in something this heavy shows just how toxic this entire group of 6 really was. They were a black hole in that community, pulling everything and everyone around them into the dark. While all this unbelievable drama is playing out, the stolen cop cars, the handcuff escapes, the manhunts, you have to remember there's a family at the center of this, just trying to breathe. Michael and Renee, Kayla's parents, and her siblings, Christina and Joseph. I can't even fathom what it's like for them to watch this circus unfold. They are trying to process the violent, sudden loss of the girl they called Kayla Bug. They are trying to figure out how to wake up every morning knowing she isn't in her room. And meanwhile, the people responsible are turning the investigation into a chaotic spectacle. That level of disrespect to the victim's family is profound. It's like the suspects didn't even view Kayla as a human being with a family who loved her desperately. To them, she was just an object, a problem they dealt with, and escaping the cops was just the next level of the game. When you put yourself in the shoes of Kayla's brother and sister, watching the local news report that the woman accused of killing their sister just drove off in a police car, wow. It just compounds the trauma. It makes you feel like the system meant to protect you is totally out of control, and the people who hurt your family are just doing whatever they want. But the reality is, they aren't untouchable. The game did catch up with them. Law enforcement pushed through the chaos, which is why we are looking at this massive roster of defendants right now. 6 people sitting in jail cells, waiting for the legal system to finally grind them down. The police didn't let the stolen car stunt stop them. They tracked them down, they put the handcuffs back on, and they locked them away where they can't hurt anyone else on the back roads of Missouri. As much as we talk about the chaotic details, the arrests, and the crazy escape attempts, we absolutely cannot let the suspects' wild behavior overshadow what they actually did at the core of all this. They took a bright, loving 16-year-old girl away from her family forever. They sabotaged her car, they waited in the dark, and they executed a plan. We have to keep looking at them not as criminal masterminds or action movie escapees, but exactly for what they are, a group of deeply broken, incredibly dangerous people who made a conscious collective choice to destroy a life. And as this case moves forward, the community of Moberly is going to make sure that none of these 6 people, no matter what specific part they played in the nightmare, are allowed to just slip away from the consequences. Right. And because law enforcement pushed through all that chaos and didn't let those suspects slip away, the community finally had to face the hardest truth of all. For those first few days, everyone was holding on to that tiny, desperate sliver of hope. You know exactly how it is. You tell yourself that maybe it's a big misunderstanding. You tell yourself she's just stranded somewhere without cell service, or maybe she got scared and is hiding out. But when the news finally broke that Sheriff Andy Boggs and his team had officially found Kayla's remains, the town of Moberly basically stopped breathing. I mean, it literally felt like the air was just violently sucked out of the entire county. You really have to understand, Nick, of a place like Moberly to get why this hit so hard. This is a tight-knit community. It is the kind of place where people genuinely know each other's kids. You recognize the cars parked at the local grocery store. It's the kind of town where everyone shows up for Friday night sports, even if they don't have a kid on the team. So when a tragedy like this happens, it isn't just a sad headline you scroll past on the evening news. It feels like a physical blow to every single household. Parents were looking at their own teenagers, suddenly realizing that the quiet bubble of safety they thought they lived in was completely gone. Mothers were hugging their kids a little tighter before they walked out the door for school. The emotional toll on Randolph County right now cannot be overstated. You can practically feel the heavy grief hanging over the streets, settling into the diners and echoing in the high school hallways. In the wake of finding her body, the community had to figure out how to navigate an impossible, suffocating amount of grief. Where do you even go when you hear that a sweet 16-year-old girl was ambushed by a group of people from your own town? For a lot of them, the answer was the Emmanuel Baptist Church. That was the same place where Kayla spent so much of her young life growing up. The church just opened its heavy doors and kept them open for days. They offered a safe space for people to pray, to cry, and to just be around each other. Because when something this genuinely evil happens right in your own backyard, you need to be around good people, just to remind yourself that the world isn't entirely dark. You need to see your neighbors hugging each other to counteract the horror of what those 6 suspects decided to do. I see this happen in small towns a lot. They circle the wagons. They hold each other up because no one else is going to do it for them. Wow, it's so heavy just thinking about it. On May 16th, hundreds of people stood together in the cool night air for a candlelight vigil. Try to picture that scene. Hundreds of flickering lights in the dark, pushing back the shadows. People who knew her since she was a baby in a stroller, standing right next to people who only knew her face from the missing posters, all just weeping together. It was a visual representation of a town completely broken, but refusing to let her memory sit alone in the dark. And then, a few days later, on May 20th, they packed the Moberly Area Community College for her celebration of life. I see this happen in the wake of terrible crimes, and it always strikes me as such a powerful act of defiance against the killers. They didn't want the brutal clinical details of court documents to be the only thing people remembered about her. They fought so hard to make sure her radiant smile and her pure love for life were put front and center. They stood up and told stories about Kayla Bug. They talked about her running track, the way she played basketball, and how much she deeply cared for animals. They talked about her giving hugs to anyone who looked sad. They made sure that massive room was filled to the brim with her memory, not the memory of the people who took her. They took the narrative back, right? But as the days move forward and the initial blinding shock starts to settle into a permanent, heavy ache, the focus inevitably shifts to the justice system. For Kayla's parents, Michael and Renee, her sister Christina, and her brother Joseph, their entire world has been utterly shattered. Think about the reality they are waking up to every single day now. They were her foundation. They were the ones who taught her how to drive, who cheered the loudest at her games, who told her to be safe when she grabbed her car keys. And now they are forced to shift from a privately grieving family into a family publicly seeking justice. They're going to have to sit in cold, sterile, wood-paneled courtrooms and look across the aisle at the people who stole their daughter and sister. I honestly can't even imagine the level of restraint it takes to sit in a hard chair and look at Alayna Mason, Hunter Ames, and the rest of that group, knowing exactly what they did to your little girl in that conservation area. To sit there and listen to defense attorneys try to spin the narrative or exploit legal loopholes or try to downplay the sheer brutality of what happened. It is a vicious, secondary kind of trauma that the families of murder victims are forced to endure. We really have to sit back and ask ourselves what true justice even looks like in a case this severe. When multiple adults conspire to hunt down a trusting child, is spending the rest of their lives behind bars enough to actually balance the scales? Can a prison sentence, even a life sentence, ever make up for the fact that a vibrant 16-year-old was thrown in the trunk of a car, terrified in the dark, and beaten with a baton before she was killed? Most people looking at this case would say no. The punishment almost never feels like it matches the crime when the crime is this purely evil. And then you have to ask, what happens to the juvenile involved in all this? How does the justice system appropriately handle a minor who got swept up in a murderous pack of adults? Do they get a lighter sentence because of their age, even though they participated in something so irredeemably dark? Or do you try them as an adult because the crime is just too heinous to ignore? These are the incredibly frustrating, deeply complicated questions the legal system is going to have to answer in the coming months and years. Because make no mistake, the legal process is going to be incredibly long. It is going to be exhausting. Trials get delayed, hearings get pushed back for months, motions get filed, and every single time the family thinks they can finally take a breath, they are going to be dragged right back into court. It is going to be unbelievably painful for Kayla's family as every horrible detail, every text message between the suspects, and every piece of grim forensic evidence is dragged out into the open for a jury to look at. They're going to have to hear exactly how she suffered over and over again in front of strangers. But if there is one thing that is absolutely clear right now, it is that the town of Moberly is not backing down. They are not going to let the family walk into those intimidating courtrooms alone. I see communities get fired up for a week and then move on to the next big news story all the time. But this feels very different. The people here are showing up. They are watching the prosecutors, they are watching the judge, and they are closely watching those 6 defendants. They are making it known that this town isn't moving on. This is no longer just a missing person story that gets a quick, sad mention on the evening news. It is a loud, unified demand for absolute accountability. The community understands that you can't rewind time. You can't bring Kayla back, but you can definitely make sure the people who hurt her never, ever get the chance to walk free and do this to someone else's child. They are going to stand behind Michael, Renee, Christina, and Joseph for as long as this takes, whether it's months or years. They are going to make sure that the people who tried to throw Kayla's life away in the dark, who thought they could just leave her out in the woods and get away with it by playing games, stealing police cars, and hiding from the law, are forced to answer for every single thing they did. They are going to be dragged out of their cells and into the blinding light of a courtroom. And all their secrets, all their terrible choices, and all their cowardly brutality will be laid out for the whole world to judge. It's not going to be a quick fix, and it will never truly heal the massive aching hole left in that family or that town. But fighting for that absolute justice is the absolute least that Kayla deserves. Thank you for staying till the end. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to U.S. Crime Cases so we can continue seeking true justice together.